Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be discussing if you can derive an ought from an is, or as I will change it, we will be discussing the is-ought fallacy. It is so common that people say this, that you can't derive an ought from an is. If you don't believe me, we can just check this out.
If it's a statement of faith and it's in the value domain, how is it derivable from facts?
No ought statement can be logically derived from is statement.
I don't think you can get an ought from an is. You can't do it. Hume is right.
It is impossible to bridge an is-ought gap. That can never possibly be bridged.
So, you see, some of the biggest names in philosophy and on YouTube all seem to agree that you cannot derive an ought from an is. So what does this mean? An is a fact, and an ought is what one should do. So the thing is that life, the fact that, life is the only thing that gives rise to values. There are no values if there is no life. This is to argue against sort of intrinsic value, which cannot exist because nothing has a value in itself. All value is created by the act of living. So living is life rather, is the only end in itself, metaphysically. It is the only thing that has value in itself. The fact that you are alive means that you value living, you value your life. So to speak of values as divorced from life is a contradiction. It can't exist, right? It is to talk about nothing. And as we have looked at, nothing can't exist. So let's look at a better description here of the is-ought dichotomy, or as I always call it, the is-ought fallacy explained. And then I will go into debunking it a little bit more.
Can you derive what you ought to do from facts about the world? This is a style of argument many people use. They take how things are and use that to draw conclusions about how things should be. For example, we evolved as meat-eating animals. Therefore, we ought to eat meat.
So let me pause right here. So there's already a problem with this, and it's talking about the we, saying that we evolved to do something, so we need to, and they're saying that you can't derive this. Well, I would say that you definitely can't derive the values of another person. Values are determined rationally, and rationality or reason exists only in the mind, and there are no collective minds. So it is determined individually. This does not make it subjective, because we take the objective facts of reality, we take our goals, our values that we need, that are inseparable from us living life, and then we use our reason to validate it. So it's not based on a feeling or a whim or an intuition. It is based on reason, individually. So already saying that this is a problem. Let's continue.
Is this a reasonable way of arguing? David Hume thought not. In his view, people move too readily from observations of facts to judgments about values. There's a gap in their reasoning. This is the famous is-ought gap, also known as Hume's law or Hume's guillotine, because he severs any direct connection between facts and values.
So, yes, he severs it. He divorces values from the fact of life. But as I already discussed, values come from life. You cannot divorce it. Life cannot be lived without values, and values cannot exist without life. They cannot be separated. Let's continue.
In the meat-eating example, there's an implied unstated assumption. We ought to do whatever we evolved to do.
Okay, so yeah, this is an implied assumption that is wrong. It is not that whatever our ancestors did, you should also value just because they did. So that would be a fallacy. It would be assuming values based on factors outside of your own reason, which would be irrational.
But that is a controversial moral premise that vegetarians would dispute. Since Hume described it in the 18th century, numerous moralists have tried to bridge this is-ought gap. They've argued from what is natural or unnatural to what we should or shouldn't do. From facts about what makes human beings happy to evaluations of what we should do next, or from discoveries about human biology to claims about how we ought to live. If Hume was right, they've all committed a logical mistake.
Okay, so we can't derive the values of everybody. They are not universal in the sense that a value for life must be valued by everybody, but rather every value that I have, for example, is universalizable. It could be shared by everybody else, but there is no reason that it must be shared by everybody else. And this is because everybody has different values. I've talked about it before, but for instance, let's say that there is a mason, and he's building a wall, and he's looking for certain stones that will fit his wall. So now he's looking for stones about this big. They have to have a certain density to them so they're not too brittle. And then since there's a bit of aesthetic value to it, he also wants them to be of a uniform color. So he's looking for stones of the same size, let's say white, or same color, let's say white, and the same size, about this size, and the same kind of rock that is dense enough to withstand weathering and keep being a wall. So he would view the objective fact in reality, the rock, and look at its objective facts, its density, its size, its color. And he would determine if it is valuable based on his value, his goal. And his goal is building a wall that looks nice. And how would he know if these rocks fit would be good for his wall? It's not what he feels or his intuition. It is his reason. His reason is what will validate whether it is true or not. And reason is abstractions from our perceptions, and our perceptions are the facts of reality. And this is determined objectively, right? You can objectively say whether these rocks will be good for this wall. And good for this wall are determined by his values, meaning that it'll hold, it'll look like this, and the rocks will be about this size and this density. There is no way to not live life, or to not have values and live life. You can't live life without values. It's absolutely impossible. So as Hume does, he divorces this. He divorces life, that is, from the values, the ought. But it can't be divorced. It can't be understood at all. You cannot live life without values. For instance, let's say that I come along as a rock skipper, and I look at the same rock that the mason viewed as objectively good for his wall. So an intrinsicist might say, oh, well, it's not good for rock skipping, so it doesn't have any intrinsic value in this sense of good. But of course, it can't have intrinsic value because all value is created by life, and it depends on what my goal is. So me as a rock skipper, I would say that the same rocks that the stonemason selected for his wall have a negative value or a bad value for rock skipping. And how would I know this? I would use my reason to say, well, I'm looking for smaller rocks that are flatter and are lighter, so I can throw them and they can skip, because this big rock, I would have to throw it so hard, and I'm not strong enough to do that. This is not based on anything subjective. All the things I just told you are objective facts. I use my reason in relation to my values to show that these big rocks that are valuable for the wall are not valuable for skipping. So the is-ought fallacy is just that, because it is impossible to live life without having values. And these values are not determined, well, they're determined by a living thing. They do not exist outside of life. This is a contradiction. To say that something has value intrinsically in itself, independent of any valuer, is nonsense. And to say that all value is subjective is just based on whatever I feel, no, it's not. It's based on the objective facts of reality, validated using reason, and are universalizable because the facts are objective. The reason is universal to humans, and it can be used to validate the same thing I have validated. And it's not based on anything that is subjective. It's based on the facts. That might have sounded a little convoluted, and perhaps it was. I don't always speak perfectly. But I hope I made myself clear enough. So this is-ought distinction has to die, because it is basically saying that what your life is isn't what it is, because what your life is, it is completely intertwined with values, and it is impossible to not value things and to live. So the ultimate value is life, and this is the given. And you might say, well, what about somebody that commits suicide? Well, all actions and values can be rational or irrational, and it depends on the context. So it's not that suicide is always rational or irrational, or good or negative, or bad or evil, however you want to describe it. For instance, with life being the highest value, if you are suffering and there is no foreseeable end to the suffering, and it might seem like it'll just get worse, and you've tried everything, well, the fact that you value life might lead to you rationally committing suicide, because you can't live life well. But if you had a bunch of responsibilities and other people depended on you, like your children that you brought into the world, that they didn't have a choice, and then you are responsible for them, and you commit suicide, I would view this as irrational. And of course, there are irrational values, but this does not change the fact that values are still always present in everything we do. So this has been me actually thinking today. If you think I was doing a bad job, let me know, and I'll see you in the next one.